Welcome to the Faithful Steward. This is a podcast all about sharing biblical wisdom and practical insights in order to help church leaders pursue and teach financial freedom as part of Christian discipleship. We believe this is a spiritual conversation, and this is a place where the church needs to lead the way in order to move our communities forward in how we steward God's resources. I'm your host, James Lenhoff, and I am so passionate about this conversation and helping leaders have the confidence to step into it. We believe that if we help people thrive financially and grow spiritually, it changes everything. And I am so excited to join you on this journey. This podcast is brought to you by Good Sense. If you'd like more information about what we're up to, you can go to our website at goodsensemovement.org. All right, let's get started with today's conversation. Well, today is a really special day for me. Today marks 1 year for this podcast. 1 year ago today, actually, we launched the Faithful Steward podcast. And our first episode is still one of our more popular episodes as we challenge the church, challenge ourselves to step further into this conversation and lead the conversation around money, that we need to be faithful stewards. And thousands of downloads later, here we are 1 year into this journey. And I just want to make sure that first and foremost, I say thank you. Thank you for those of you who've been listening. Thank you as you've emailed me with ideas for topics for us to talk about, and keep those coming. What would be helpful for us to dive into? We are wanting this to be something that is valuable. And so if you have an idea or a topic that you think would be really helpful as you're leading people, or helpful just in your own journey towards faithful stewardship, we love those recommendations and to hear from you. And thank you for spreading the word, continuing to share with others this conversation. I think the church has taken a back seat in a lot of ways and avoided this topic of money because it's intimidating, it's scary, it seems complicated, but I actually think it is in the church's wheelhouse. This is the space that we should be leading. And we need a framework. We need to be able to speak to those things that the Bible tells us we need to honor God with his resources. We need to be able to give people handles, ways to think about it, wisdom to hold on to as they make decisions in a world that's telling them that they own it. And that was really the starting point of this conversation, are the 6 big ideas that Good Sense has been teaching for 40 plus years, that we will only be free when we break this ownership mindset and we step into faithful stewardship, that God owns everything and we are just managing his resources, but he always owns them no matter how big they get. That we need to step into diligent earning, that a faithful steward is a diligent earner and a prudent spender. That it's not just that we earn well, we also spend intentionally. And that a prudent spender is a generous giver first, a wise saver, and a cautious debtor. Those ideas have been the foundation of Good Sense for a very, very long time. And that's really where we started this conversation. And those still continue to be some of our most popular episodes, which is just delightful to me to know that this idea, this framework, these 6 ideas are catching on, that churches are starting to see this is a role for them to play. One of our most popular episodes beyond those first several that lay that framework was this conversation around the deceitfulness of wealth, this idea that money is not evil, money is neutral. Debt is not evil, debt is neutral. But just as Scripture has always been telling us, our heart can fall in love with what money gives us: status, significance, power, a sense of security, a sense of self-sufficiency. And those are all the things that wealth ultimately, over time, if we're not careful, can start to undermine our relationship with God. It's not money that is evil. It's our own heart towards money. It's the way that we love that money that starts to undermine our dependence on God, our understanding of our role that we play when it comes to these resources, and we start to tell ourselves a story that can really break that relationship with the owner of these resources because we think we own it, that we did it by ourselves. We also talked about this way to look back, this framework for us to evaluate last year and prepare for next year. As we turned the calendar between December and January last year, we started to build these processes into our family conversations to be able to talk about money more openly, more consistently, and to evaluate honestly where we have fallen short as faithful stewards and where we've made progress. And then look at the coming year and make intentional decisions around things like our lifestyle cap, things like our non-negotiables. What are we picking up and what do we need to put down? And we all agree that it's worth putting those things down so that we get the things that are most important to us in the coming year. And those are such beautiful conversations to set your kids up well. And that's another topic we spent a lot of time on this year, teaching kids about money, how to give them access to failure and mistakes. What does it look like for them to make early mistakes and make them often so that they can learn from them and grow from them and become more understanding of the experience of money? Those were episodes 35 through 39. We talked about the stages of development for kids and how they interact with money in those stages, ways that we get in the way as parents of their growth, ways that we shut down their learning by blocking them from failure. We also talked about the way that they end up coming back sometimes as kind of that revolving door. And how do we set boundaries and intentionality with those adult children who've returned to our home? So we covered so much ground when it comes to interacting with kids. We also did a 3-part series on money and marriage. Those episodes 22 through 24, we talked about this idea of being one. That we need to break away from this mine and yours mentality to ours. This is all ours. We are one in our decision making. We are unified in the way that we approach it. But we also talked about the fact that our money motivations can really break some of that relational progress, that we can see each other as enemies and be frustrated with the ways that we're motivated. If someone is motivated by delight and enjoyment and they want to go have fun, and somebody's motivated by security and safety and they want to stay in this place of hoarding and oversaving, those two in relationship will always be in constant conflict. And so how do we manage those? Understand the backgrounds that we brought to the table from our families of origin and how that experience with money growing up shapes the way we think about money now. All of those interactions growing up, we either become a reflection of that, we do it again, or we become a reaction to it, we reject it, and we go in the opposite direction. And those things inform then how we step into money management as a couple, and we bring those backgrounds together, and we need to make sure we work through those things and decide going forward how we will be one. I know that money is always cited as the reason that people get divorced, but it is very rarely actually the reason. It's just where a lot of the conflict was being experienced. It's just that a lot of the disconnection and the brokenness that both parties bring to the table really shows up in money decisions. We spent a lot of time this year talking about how we measure our progress through our net worth growth. That net worth is not your human worth. We are all of infinite value, but our net worth is our financial litmus test that says this is what you own minus what you owe, and that should be growing over time, that God gives us these resources to manage, and his expectation is multiplication. And that when it grows, it's still all his, no matter how big it gets. He owns it all, always, but there is an expectation that we will make progress. And we get that through the parable of the talents, this idea of an expectation to multiply the kingdom. Go and do more with it than what I started you with. Go build it. Go make it bigger. What a beautiful call to co-create with God. But so often we measure our success by our incomes, our cash flows. But that is not actually financial success. That's just part of the input that gives us an opportunity for financial success. And we talked about the idea of Henry's, that high earner, not rich yet, and how they need to reframe their thoughts around what makes someone financially successful. We need to aim at that net worth piece. Throughout this whole year, we've sprinkled in several conversations for church leaders, what it looks like to really separate the conversation around stewardship from the conversation around generosity. That so often churches only talk about money when they're asking for some. And we need to break those conversations apart to make sure we are seeing stewardship as part of our discipline, part of our discipleship journey. It is not only connected to giving. They are not one and the same. And so churches need to have those conversations separately. We also talked about this idea that stewardship and benevolence are different conversations as well. People who are in financial crisis need to make sure that they have stability, that they have a path forward, that they get to a place where they can catch their breath and stand on solid ground. And stewardship is a beautiful thing to call them to, but benevolence is the beginning point to just get them safe. And those are separate conversations. We love the idea of ushering people further into stewardship, but that benevolence crisis management conversation is a very different animal than this higher level discipleship call. And so we talked through a lot of different ideas for church leaders. And if you are a church leader, if you are in the position where you are trying to have this conversation, we want to help. We want to help you grow in this, grow in your confidence, grow in the tools that you have in your toolbox to make sure that you are helping your people navigate this really chaotic topic. And so if there are issues you're running up against, if there's brick walls you're butting up against, please let us know what those are so that we can do podcast episodes, we can resource you and your team to be able to break through some of those barriers. I hope that this is a conversation that continues to evolve. We continue to challenge each other. We continue to grow in the fullness of our understanding of how this all works, that we communicate clearly some of these core topics, but that we also understand all the pressures that are happening around our people. So as we think about the year ahead, we're going to step further into some of the psychology of money, how our brains work, how God has designed us, and how sometimes we trick ourselves into thinking incorrectly. We're going to talk about things like the Enneagram and money, and how does our wiring and our style, our personality style, impact the way that we do relationship and the way that we do money, and how those intersect a lot of times in our lives. We're also going to dive into a deeper dive into budgeting software, what options there are out there, and what we think is necessary in order to make sure that your tracking is successful. We're going to spend time on bankruptcy and some other hot topics. And so we're really excited about furthering this conversation, but we want more input from you. Any ideas that you have, please feel free to send them on, because this is the beginning. We are a year into this conversation, but this is a very long journey. The journey of stewardship is a lifelong experience. And so we want to make sure that we are covering all these different topics to empower you and to empower your people that you are leading. Faithful stewardship is the key that unlocks so much freedom, so much resourcing and funding, and so much delight and confidence in the families that you're leading. And so we are honored to partner with you in that work. I am delighted to continue to lead this conversation. And I'm so glad that you've continued to walk alongside me as we journey together towards faithful stewardship. Well, thank you so much for listening to the Faithful Steward podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for links and other information that we mentioned in today's episode. Also, be sure to check out our website at goodsensemovement.org to get all the resources we offer churches to help equip them in teaching financial stewardship to their community. If you have any questions or any topics you want to make sure we cover on our show, you can email me at jameslenhoff@goodsensemovement.org. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you all have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.